Hi, I'm Des Burkinshaw.
And I'm Mark Hooper.
Welcome to Without the Beatles, the Christmas edition. So season 1's over and done with. How's it gone for you?
It's been quite a ride, hasn't it?
It has.
Really good.
Has. So we've managed to get those lovely interviews with Lemmy and Lol Cream, Mary Quant, Steve Van Zandt and Terry Gilliam. We've got even more lined up for the new year, but today is special. Today we're going out at the same time as King Charles.
I think we had a rival in for numbers.
So we thought we'd do a Christmas edition, and who better to do it with than Jona Lewie. Jona, hi.
Hi.
Welcome to Without the Beatles.
And hi, Mark.
Welcome, Mike. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you both. Yeah.
Brilliant.
We've got to talk about Christmas first, haven't we? Should we get the Christmas bit out of the way?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, happy Christmas.
Oh, and to you.
Yeah. We're doing our little bit for the
Did
for
you
the
enjoy
revolution.
your turkey today?
We had it just before this record.
Right.
That's what they do on Jules Holland, isn't it? Pretend to be doing New
Oh,
Year.
they probably do.
Every year they pretend to do New Year, but they film it in November.
Well, there's a lot of pretend. A
It
lot of
just do it
pretend on
at the
TV.
3, 2, 1, Happy New Year! It's November.
never
It's very weird when you
I
go.
feel cheated now.
Well, they can't get all those people on New Year's Eve, you know. But anyway, but we're definitely doing this on Christmas Day, straight after the turkey, obviously. No lies there. Jona, it's a great pleasure to have you on.
Pleasure to be here.
We're not going to talk about Christmas first because we always start the same way, don't we, Mark?
Yeah, well, it sort of ties in because we always ask people, can you imagine what your life would have been like without the Beatles?
That's an interesting question, actually, because how does one look at it? You know, like Planet of the Apes.
Exactly.
If it hadn't have been the guy going back, doing something different, he wouldn't have come back with everybody else being apes.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so without the Beatles, how would it have happened? What would have happened? So there's a whole host of things you could soup up or in your imagination. But all I can say is that they were dominant, very, very dominant in the 60s, in every walk of life. They just penetrated right through to the very end. You couldn't have penetrated more than what they did. Well, actually, it was the penetration that Elvis Presley achieved in the 50s. Presley in the 50s, Beatles in the 60s.
Yeah.
In the 70s, it was more than just one, you know.
Yeah.
The second to the Beatles was the Stones. And I don't know what was second to Elvis, because he was so far ahead of everyone else. But the 70s, well, who can one say? Who was the standout, you know?
Yeah,
but more than one person. Elton John was a biggie.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. History has been quite kind to ABBA and Queen, I think.
Yeah.
So I think they're probably now the two biggest acts, you know, in terms of legacy acts, you know, which is interesting. Obviously, I'm the world's biggest Beatle fan.
And they are both enormous, actually, ABBA and Queen, in terms of longevity as well, because they've had the advantage of having a few extra decades to work with, whereas the Beatles and Elvis, in a way, didn't, because they broke up in 1970. So they couldn't add on anything because they stopped doing things, except McCartney as a solo, Harrison as a solo, you know, etc. All Things Must Pass.
All Things Must Pass.
Great classic.
But it is different. Where were you in '63? How old were you?
In '63, I was something like, I always had trouble working it out, but I was a young teen.
What was it? So what was it like? What happened? When was the first time you heard of them?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. Another good question. It dawned on me about the Beatles when a person, a member of my family, who wasn't a blood relative, but an in-law to my stepfather or something, talked about the Beatles one Christmas, and that was the Christmas of '62. And I thought, well, what's she going on about? I've not heard of them, you know. But it soon dawned on me, and it was a kind of when I first was aware of them, they sort of came across as almost like a teeny bopper band, you know, kind of very pop. And I'd already gone backwards, because I was into pop in the 50s, and a lot of that pop was hard rock and roll. Yeah. You know, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Elvis Presley, and Fats Domino. They were all hard black stuff, but no tinge of blackness at all in the early 60s from England, except perhaps Move It by Cliff Richard. That was something special.
Interesting stat, right? The first time a Tamla Motown record or song was played on UK radio was in '62 when the
Pirates?
Beatles. No, it was when the Beatles covered it on the BBC
Yeah,
Saturday
they opened
Club.
things up.
Yeah,
They
which is really
introduced a
bizarre,
lot of
isn't
black stuff in the early 60s, incidentally, because they were into it as well. They were into the 50s. You know, John Lennon biggest influence was Elvis.
Yeah.
He was an Elvis fanatic, and McCartney loved Fats Domino, another black guy, you know. So they had that relativeness, and therefore Tamla Motown via the Beatles makes perfect sense.
I love how sometimes they're trying to, Paul's trying to sound like Fats Domino, and he'll get it slightly wrong, and it almost creates something new. It's like, by trying to ape something else, you end up sort of creating a new.
Yeah, to me, when I first heard Get Back in 1970, was it 69, 70?
Yeah.
I was amazed at this track, and I did not recognise it to be Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
And when they said it was, I was even more gobsmacked, because to me it sounded like Blind Lemon Jefferson,
Yeah, yeah.
who was a 1920s country blues artist. And I was Johnny and Joker, you know, it was just unbelievable.
Where were you in your piano playing in '63?
I had already started playing, and I did lessons via my grandmother when I was very young. I was doing blues and boogie woogie, and that was because I was being influenced heavily by Fats Domino, who was a great pianist. Check out Fats Frenzy, and you know, so I was on my way as a pianist by then, but I'd started out with my grandmother sending me to lessons, so I learnt scales and nursery rhymes and stuff. And then nothing happened about that. I didn't seem to get any further until my stepfather walked into the house in '58 with a Fats Domino album in his hands, and he started playing it in another room, and I was listening to the television, watching the television, and when the music started, I sort of got a bit my heart started to sort of jump. What is this? It's exciting, you know, and so that cemented my relationship with Fats Domino. '64, I joined a band called the Corsairs, and it was the summer holidays. And by then, Tamla Motown and stuff, and people were doing R&B.
What was gigging like in those days? I mean, because, just on the technical level, like from PAs to lugging heavy valve amps and stuff.
Well, one highlight, it was just a small band I was in, but one highlight was we backed Gene Vincent, actually, just up the road in Sutton. And that's why I did it. But and I remember him, wore black leather, sort of limped on stage, you know. But there was no big deal with going to gigs, lugging AC30s or stuff like that, you know. That was later on in my life, really.
So what did you do? Just what were you playing through then and stuff?
Yeah, good question. Well, I joined a jazz band after the R&B band, and we just had practices in the clarinetist's front room. So that was the piano then. We did one gig, and there's a photograph of it. I'm not even on stage because the clarinetist and trumpet is in front of me. I'm on an upright piano playing that one. And the pianist always had the bad deal. Ian Stewart, he never became a Stone because he played piano.
Yeah, not rock.
You know, because you can't carry your piano around.
And he was weird looking. To be fair, he did look like
he didn't
a boxer.
didn't fit
Yeah,
in with it,
I understand that. He didn't tune in the way the bass player did. The bass player looked like a Stone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
definitely.
played with him, didn't you, Ian Stewart?
I did actually. Yeah, we had boogie woogie parties
Yeah, brilliant.
by Bob Hall. That was fun. Yeah.
So what was he like? You know, because
Oh,
he is the hidden Stone. You know, in that sense.
I know. He was just a good guy, just another geezer. You know. What are we all like? We're all human. You know.
It must have been a very exciting time, you know, and suddenly you had your choice of bands to be in and things like that.
Yeah, the birth of the '60s, in that sense, was very exciting. There was this sense of something new happening, and as I say, this relative of mine was going on about the Beatles, the Who, you know, but very shortly after that, you became aware of a buzz from the ground upwards, and there was so much going on, and then it just got better and bigger and more fascinating as the decade went on, and that was one of the decades, you know, the 20s, the 60s, and the 50s for me, and that was big too because of rock and roll.
It feels like when that early scene with the particular blues and R&B, like I said, it sort of came from the ground up a bit. And I remember hearing John Paul Jones talking about how you literally meet somebody in a pub in South London and go, "Oh, you should see my friend Dave. He lives down in Sydenham. He's got a Sun House record," and you just go and knock on his door and go, "Oh, here you've got a record," and I come in and play it to you, you know, because that's how it. You know,
it was very special.
Yeah.
That explains why it was so special when person who became a Stone met the other person who became a Stone in a railway station.
Yeah.
They were both carrying blues albums under their arm. Oh, that was special.
Yeah, it's like a badge
You know,
of,
yeah. And it really was special because the blues was very obscure at that time, you know.
I think it's quite interesting when you see, you know, subsequently when Beatles come to America, they were introducing white America to their own music, you know, just black American music. Which
Because the Americans didn't even know it was happening.
Yeah.
They thought, hey, where'd you get that music from? They would say to the Stones, we got it from you, mate, from your country. All the blacks down in the South, you know,
or even like
strumming their guitar and I got up this morning, you know, all that rock and roll music, that voice.
It's really interesting as well because the Beatles, when they went on tour, it's covered in one of the Beatles films, but documentaries. But they had a contract that said no segregation in the audience. So you have people like Bonnie Greer, Whoopi Goldberg saying, "First time I ever sat with white people was at a Beatles concert."
Yeah, that was a great move forward, wasn't it?
It was. I don't suppose they even had anything to do with the signing of that contract. It's just Brian acting on their behalf, but at the same time, it is really, really interesting to imagine someone actually even saying that in living memory. That was the first time I sat with white people.
Yeah.
It's lucky the Beatles had that power and influence because they were so big in the States by then, and if they wanted to have it open to any audience and any culture, you know, they were going to listen. People were going to listen to what they wanted. You know.
How did your career develop through the 60s then?
Where did we get to in the 60s?
A-levels.
I did a demo for R.G. Jones' studio because I was trying to get a publishing agreement where I could write songs for people. And at one gig, the piano again, the gig I was doing, the piano had about 4 notes that worked, 7 that didn't, and all the others were out of tune. And the Bretts came on first, Brett Marvin and the Thunderbolts. I've got the flyer upstairs. I'll show it to you before we go out. And John Lewis wasn't supporting, but it was equal billing. I was at John Lewis at that time, not Jona Lewie. And so Brett Marvin and the Thunderbolts had done their gig, and then they sat down in the audience. It was them and about 7 other people. That was the size of the audience, because blues and folk clubs were like that, you know. And I did my gig, but they were so kind because the piano was so bad. They kept having big time after every number. And in the end, saw more and more of them. And Graham would come to my house. Nick Pearls from Yazoo in America, New York, came over and recorded us in my mum's front room, and ended up on the Blues is meant to be Barrel Housed or something, or one of the blues albums I appeared on. And in the end, Graham asked me to join. And Graham was the fantastic lead guitarist of that band. He had a great, I thought he had a fantastic future, you know, like as big as Led Zeppelin or whatever, but somehow it didn't happen. But there you go.
And when you changed your name, you know, as an artist to Jona from John Lewis, was that because there was another John Lewis, or was it because of the shop, or you just felt it sounded better?
No, but my mum always called me Jona. Well, not always, but often did as a nickname.
When you were in trouble.
And I at school they always called me Louis, and the Brett Marvin band called me Louis as well.
Yeah.
And when I eventually left the Brett Marvin band, I thought, well, what should I have for my stage name? So I was going to try and go solo, you see. And then Jona came in and Louis came in. I thought, yes, it's a bit like John Lewis, so let's do that. And that's how that happened.
Is that a Louis thing? Is that why they were calling you Louis? Was it?
No, it wasn't. For some reason, completely independently of each other, the band, Brett Marvin, and my schoolmates would call me Louis. And there was no connection between them.
Yeah. So it was written in the stars, basically.
In the gods, kind of thing.
Basically.
Well, you could say.
So
I'm not over superstitious, but there you go.
we don't.
Or religious, I should say.
We obviously do not need to relate everything back to the Beatles, but I noticed that Brett Marvin and you know, and all that's happening '69 as the Beatles end and everything. What was it? What was that like? Did you feel the end of the '60s?
Not half. By '69, I was very much a '60s fan because there was such an amazing vibe. It felt like all being together as a family. I loved it, you know, and the people at college and everything. It was just brilliant. And I remember going to America as a as to work in an upstate New York camp as a camp counselor as part of my sociology degree stuff. And but on the way over, we went by ship, which was great. And anyway, when I got there, there was a great feeling about Honky Tonk Women. The Stones had just come out and they were #1 in America. They just landed on the moon and stuff. And in the year 23, 24 or whatever, 69. And then Sympathy for the Devil, the great Stones album came out. And Brian Jones had just died. And there was the Hyde Park thing. And he threw the things up, Mick, in memory of Brian. And so much going on. It was just, it was fantastic. And the Beatles were still kind of there because that was the bombshell there, was 1970. And the Beatles, man, look, Get Back was #1 for ages in 1969 in America. It was huge. And it was just unbelievable. Yeah.
But it's really interesting because I think there's a bit of a gap. So 1970 to when New Wave and everything kicks off, about 78, to me there's some absolutely brilliant music made. There is, but it's not as vibey. Even for someone who was only little at the time, but listening to it back, I feel it was not as vibey. So we lost something at the end of the 60s, and it takes punk and New Wave to bring it back again.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It got very boring from about 71. The Beatles and the Stones were still going, of course, but the Beatles had gone, and music felt like it was not so good, and the first spark of liveliness, something special, revolutionary, in the imagination with people, it was the Pistols and the punk thing.
Yeah.
Which was, in fact, there's a little story about, I was at this punk venue, Sham 69 were headlining, and it was the night Elvis Presley died, in 1977.
Yeah.
The decade we're talking about now, the come down from the 60s, the great 60s, to the boring 70s. But punk had started by 76, 77. Elvis died in 77, and I was at this punk club, and the DJ announced, Elvis Presley's died. And all the punks, hooray, hooray, as they were dancing, hooray, hooray. But in the audience was Mark Perry, who did a punk magazine called Sniffing Glue. And he came up on stage, hey, you guys, you got it all wrong. He was one of us. And of course he was right, because Elvis in 56, 21 years before, was the punk, was the rebellion person. He was on the moon and everyone else hadn't even driven a car on Earth.
Yeah.
He was so far ahead and so original and became so influential because of that. He influenced all the big guys in the 60s. And I already said he influenced John Lennon like crazy.
Yeah.
But my friend Don Randy, he was part of the Wrecking Crew, played on all the Brian stuff and the Beach Boys and everything. And he was a pianist on one of the comeback specials. And they had the one with the orchestra. It was an NBC special or something like that. Anyway, because whatever, they were trying to do it, and Elvis couldn't get it, and it was really weird. He just couldn't get it. And the producers were getting upset, going, we're running out of time, we've got to get this number. And Don says, what are you giving him on fallback? And they were giving him the orchestra. He goes, he's a freaking blues singer. You just give him bass and drums, he'll be fine, right? And so he calls Elvis over and goes, look, we need to do this. And then this guy with the clipboard and the headset comes over and goes, can you hurry up, please? We've got to go to lunch, otherwise we've got to pay the orchestra another £50,000. And Elvis goes, actually, let's go for lunch. And Don said he was just that kind of guy, so the orchestra got double time just because this guy had been winding him up. He goes, but as soon as we come back, gave him the right mix, did it in one take. So they had to pay him £50,000 for this one take.
Yeah. Look, when push comes to shove, he was the boss, Elvis. And also he played bass guitar on Baby I Don't Care, one of the Jailhouse Rock tracks.
Yeah.
Bloody great bass guitar. And he played guitar on One Night, which he did in the Spectacular in '67 live.
That's one of my favourites.
Yeah, and he played piano on Old Shep, But to me, he was raw in the 50s. The first early tracks, to me, he never surpassed that really. Mystery Train, That's All Right Mama, Baby I Don't Care though. The Jailhouse Rock track is great. I Want to Be Free as well. but all those early tracks, and Mike Baby Left Me, an old Arthur Big Boy Trot Up Blues number, he transcends the original version. It's like Bono said, you know, Elvis didn't just cover a track, he rewrote it. He was dead right. Blue Suede Shoes, what a rewritten feel of Carl Perkins' original version.
Yeah. Used to wind Carl Perkins up a bit, that, but what could you do? But you obviously subscribe to John Lennon's view that Elvis died after the army.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, John Lennon, he was raw. He had a rawness, and was his. I love the Lennon aspect of the Beatles. All those, he slightly dwindled as the 60s went on.
2 years of heroin at the end. That's going to slow you down, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. I didn't realise he was that heavy. I know there was things, but yeah, it's a shame. But anyway.
Cold Turkey is 1969.
Yeah, of course.
About how trying to get off it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. But it's interesting because I think, you know, that's that sort of dynamic of having, it's almost like the sarcastic and the positive two voices in the same band, where you kind of, I think McCartney
Great
kind of
foils
needs
to each
rub
other.
against something like that. Yeah.
The greatest foil to me is on the Pepper album, when there's Lennon in the clouds, da, 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 and then got up, got out of bed. You know, what a contrast. And the foil against each other is just brilliant. You know.
As we come into new wave, where are you then?
The punk and the early stuff in the 50s were certainly connected very highly. One of my favourite albums actually is the Bollocks album. The production on that is unbelievable.
Chris Thomas.
And it's partly because the bass guitarist is also the guitarist. So there's an incredible connection, music-wise, in terms of the togetherness. It wasn't Glenn Matlock.
Yeah,
it was the guy who did the lead guitar, the
Steve Jones.
Yeah.
And actually, it mentioned Chris Thomas, who produced that. He also worked on the White Album sessions.
And did Back to the Egg.
And he was
And
kind
the
of brought in.
Pretenders and
So I spoke to him about that actually, and they were saying, you know, all this stuff about being fractious and doing the White Album session. No, it's all because it was just who's in today, and they weren't all in. But whoever's in did the job. They were professionals, got into. So as far as I was concerned, it was brilliant. It was a dream. I was working with the Beatles. Everyone was happy with the music. That's all that, you know. Whatever happened when they left the room was nothing to do with me. So,
yeah.
It's amazing. He was involved in, like, he's got like almost every. He went through his period, late 60s, early 70s, where he was involved with so many kind of, you know, breakthrough albums, wasn't he?
Indeed.
On your first Stiff album, so On the Other Hand There's the Fifth, which is a great favourite of mine.
Oh, thank you.
There's a lot of rock and roll influence stuff on there. So there's some skiffly things, there's some, you know, like Fairground and all that, where there's almost a bit Mr. Kite-ish with the organ and stuff. But there's a lot of, you know, the 3-chord trick kind of stuff going on, done really creatively. But I wonder how did the new wave people find a foot in amongst all that kind of really aggressive rock and roll, you know, punk stuff? Because I could have imagined them going, "What are you doing there, mate?" It's like doing a bit of boogie woogie on the piano, but it sort of all it worked, did it?
That's a intricate question.
Well, I'm just wondering what it was like for you at the time, because you know you've got a few years behind you now.
To be honest, I wasn't aware of what was around me, so I don't know the answer to that. I was just doing what I was doing, you know, and I would carry my influences with me through my life, and so some of it was kind of, I mean, maybe a bit of punk did rub off, maybe Feeling Stupid. Do you know Feeling Stupid from that album?
Yeah.
But to me, it was more influenced by early Elvis, because the voice on My Baby Left Me, it was all, "If my baby left me, da 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 da, da 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 da," you know.
Yeah.
That was the influence, not the other thing you said.
But you're on Stiff, right? So Stiff
Yeah.
is very, to me, is a new wave label, you know.
But it was, and New Rose. I mean, the Damned had the Stiff had the first punk album, the first punk record that went into the charts. So they were very much a punk and a new wave thing, you know. But you know, there was also Max Wall on the label, and he was a music hall artist. So the Stiff was anything and everything. You know, the Blockheads, Ian Jury, that came, funnily enough, in a funny sort of way from music hall, but he was very influenced by other bands in the set. He was, he was a pub rock band, wasn't it? Pub rocker, really, wasn't he?
Oh,
Ian
they're so
Jury.
good though. I saw his last gig. I
So
went
tight.
to Dingwalls for that
Crikey.
when he was dying, and he just wanted to do one last gig with the Blockheads.
Oh God.
Oh my God, they're a brilliant band.
Oh, aren't they? Yeah.
Flipping heck.
But what was amazing about Ian, really, watching him on stage, his impediment made it an even more fascinating live spectacle. He was doing it despite his impediment. That's what made him so brave and human and wonderful. You know,
Great lyrics as well.
Yeah.
the lyrics were great. Yeah.
And poetry, really.
Wake up and make love to me. I mean, and all those lyrics were great.
And then you start working on your second album. And well, we're drifting inexorably towards Christmas here, aren't we? So when you went into your second album, what were your expectations for your second album?
Yeah, the second album was done after Kitchen at Parties, then Stop the Cavalry. So, and on the other hand, There's a Fist was done before it. So there is that bit in between.
Oh, right. So, but they're on the album, aren't they?
Only because Kitchen and Cavalry were not on the Heart Skips Beat album, but the company put them on as re-releases, as companies do, because their business is to try and sell records. And they reckon if we can get those on the thing, it might help the album. So I've never had an album in its... I've never had a single coming off an album. The single went on the album that was already done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were looking for more releases, for more 45 RPMs. So I started doing some 45 RPMs and singles.
As someone who loves that first album, what's really interesting is it's almost like, did someone buy you a synthesizer between the end of On the Other Hand, There's a Fist, and You'll Always Find Me in the Kitchen?
That's
and
a
Parties?
very good question.
Wow.
And you're right. After Fist, I bought the Polymoog. And on the Polymoog, I did Kitchen at Parties and Cavalry, as well as lots of other things that haven't even been released, actually.
Great. But Party's an interesting song. It is an interesting song. It's got an interesting structure, and it's very bloody funny. It was that sundew in Palmer's Green.
Yeah,
That's one of the funniest lines ever. Is that a true story, is it?
Well, first of all, the structure, it was kind of weird. I didn't realise it at the time, because when we got the drummer in to do some extra drumming, Bob Andrews co-produced it. It was kind of difficult to drum to it, something like that anyway.
Well, he's got those hangover bits, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where you expect
Yeah,
it to go in
hangover,
something,
that's right.
and then it doesn't. You've got another
Yeah,
bar
yeah.
before you deliver another punchline. It's really clever.
And the bass guitarist with the Blockheads in Jury, he did a little bit of extra bass on the bass line. Yeah.
It's lovely.
Yeah.
Like that.
So that was that was very good there. And the lyrics, so I didn't write all the lyrics, incidentally, but some of those lines, I'm no good at chatting up. You'll always get rebuffed. Something about doing the washing up, right? I don't do no washing up. All the plates get stacked up unwashed. I don't do no washing up, but you will always find me in the kitchen at parties. So I thought, what a great antithesis.
Yeah.
And so
It was the story of my life. It's that thing, isn't it? In G minor.
yeah, it's in G minor. You're right. I'm no good at chatting up and I always get rebuffed. Enough to drive a man to drink. I don't do no washing up. Da da da. Da da da. Yeah, that sort of
And
thing.
then all that hanging over, yeah.
Yeah, and then but you will always find me in the kitchen at parties. You will always find me in the, the more of a sustained thing in the chorus.
Stop the Cavalry is brilliant because it's a real brass band, I assume.
Oh, yeah.
Because no samples are for that.
Yeah.
But that's brilliant because I was listening to it really analytically the other day, and I noticed there were things on it like Polymoog, pizzicato things, and a couple of portmanteaus, which you wouldn't normally, little slidey notes, which I hadn't really heard before until I was critically listening.
I did a demo on my 8-track, and actually all those tracks I did on the 8-track, we took to the 24-track and used all of them. So I actually started it off, the dum, 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 on the that was a Polymoog sound. which well, it was a polybug sound, but I created the sound on the polybug. Let's put it that way. The sustained notes at the back, I did lots of stuff, but the brass band, obviously I didn't do. And what I did on the demo, which I took into Stiff Records, was I used a kazoo. And I said to Dave, "Hey Dave, I want to have a brass band on this for the kazoo," and he being the producer in Financia, agreed.
That was a good call.
Yeah, it was good that he agreed though, because it was important. It was part of Northern England, Salvation Army, the north of England, and brass bands. Mary Bradley, a northern town, Mary Bradley works.
Well, Macca had done that in the 60s with the Black Dyke Mills band with Thingery Bob and stuff
Yes,
like
I
that, but
believe
didn't have a
maybe.
hit with it. You beat him to the punch.
I didn't realise he had.
People who don't make music probably don't, kind of appreciate. But there is that kind of moment where you get the first box of records. Do you remember when you got your first box of these and open them up and go, "Here's my new single." Where would that have been? What was it? What's it like being a kind of living, breathing artist when it's actually all happening?
Well, I think to be honest, my first experience of that was when the jazz band I was in, like 10 years earlier, we'd done a demo, and in Oak Records in Morden, Surrey, and then we all had a copy of that demo, and I've still got it somewhere, I'm on that demo, but it is amazing that sort of thing happens, and you're kind of looking at yourself in almost an existential, philosophical way. It's crazy. Is that me over there? It's something that's apart from you and yet came from you.
Well, they always say, don't they? I think it's true. Once you release a record, it's not yours anymore.
Yeah,
A song.
it's taken over by whatever it is.
Do you get mad interpretations of this song?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Come on, then give us some weird ones.
Thousands.
Come on, not covers.
Oh.
People going, "Oh, it's about this," and then getting it all wrong.
I think for many years they didn't really quite get the lyrics, because in the earlier days they would say, what's it about? That kind of thing. They didn't sort of understand that I was just dancing from one scenario to another scenario in the history of war.
Yeah. I mean, you know what it is? It's because the video pins it down to an era, right?
It does.
But the lyrics, of course, yes, it's an anthology of war, right?
Yeah.
It's the Eternal Soldier, or
That's right.
What's it called? The Unknown Soldier, or something.
That's right. And
Telling his
history
plight,
of,
right?
the flame that never goes out in memory of the Eternal Soldier under the Arc de Triomphe. There's that flame.
Yeah.
But I mentioned the Crimean War, of course, and the all sorts of places,
And nuclear fallout.
Yeah, that's right.
I guess it's almost like the Charles and Light Brigade is kind of always used as a metaphor for like stupid generals making bad decisions.
Yeah,
So
that's right. So it had to be utilised in the song, in the lyric.
I'm totally obsessed
Because
with
you
the
charged to your
Crimean War.
death, basically.
Yeah.
For what?
yeah.
For your country?
Yeah.
I say, you're a damn good show.
Yeah.
You're still alive. We need you. We need you. Lord Kitchener says we need you.
We love a bit of this, though, don't we, in Britain? It's like Blackadder 4 or something.
Oh,
when they
he
all
was
go over-
fantastic.
When they all go over the
Yeah,
trenches.
exactly.
That
That was done in the last programme of the
It was.
Blackadder, wasn't it?
and I think it's the cousin of this, that episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something
Pathos.
that,
But it is in a way.
yeah. We only add one song every couple of years to that Christmas canon, don't we? I think Ariana's one from 2 years ago as kind of starting to creep in there. What's it like being part? It's a very select group, that, having one of the classic Christmas records.
Well, it's very privileged, It's just a bit of luck, really. But it's, by the same token, overlooked the fact that it was a peace-loving song. It's the sort of thing that should be played more often during times of strife and war, as opposed to Christmas time.
Yeah.
It was number 1 in France, right?
It was.
And
In the summer.
Yeah.
I have to add, in the summer.
But it wasn't really intended
In
as
the
a
middle of the
Christmas-
summer, that is.
Yeah, it wasn't really intended as a Christmas hit, was it? It's just you mentioned Christmas in the lyrics, but that's sort of a common phrase, isn't it? We'll say
Yeah,
Christmas, and
it's
it'll all be over by Christmas.
yeah. The soldier is in the trenches,
Yeah.
and that's more of a Great War thing. there, and he's just dreaming of being at home, and it was Christmas Day, and Christmas Day there was that weird thing that happened where they all came together, the Germans and the English.
football match. The football match.
At the football match, and the trenches, and they went back to the trenches, and then 2 hours later they were shooting at each other again. So there's that kind of absurdity, you know.
Which features in Paul McCartney's Pipes of Peace video.
Does it?
Which I always
And
think,
Altogether
I always think he
Now-
nicked off you because he thought that's a good video. I need that in mind.
All Together Now, do you know that one?
Yeah,
by
yeah.
the Thingy Bob? That was also by the same,
yeah, the
about
farm.
the same incident.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so John was number one because he'd just been killed or murdered. And but had he not been murdered, then they told me that Cavalry would have got to number one. Starting Over, that was number two.
Right, yeah.
So if those two had not been there, then Jonah would have indeed been at number one. I think it's wonderful to be in the same pocket as John. You know, being in the top three, it's immense.
So there is that thing where we ask people like, without the Beatles, what would your life been? But you'd have had a Christmas number one without the Beatles, wouldn't you?
That's an interesting way of putting things, isn't it?
Probably not the way you'd want to.
I mean, without the Beatles,
have it.
my God, as I say, very difficult to even imagine. You know, but someone would have come along and taken the decade by storm, and the Stones, of course, sort of did anyway.
Yeah.
But the Stones rely on the Beatles.
Well, they do to some extent, but I
Huge,
don't know.
huge amount.
Well-
They got signed because George recommended them. They their first record was a flop, and their second record was the Beatles cover. And I think Steve Van Sant makes a really good, compelling case, actually, that the reason they played the Stones' second single was because it was a Lennon-McCartney one, and they felt like they had to. And it kind of, thank God it was a hit, because it kind of opened up that space for the Stones. But they're definitely a whole year behind them. And don't forget, Keith and Mick didn't start writing straight away either.
Yeah, they were egged on by the manager, weren't they? But what got me was that poor old Brian Jones didn't get a look in as a songwriter, which I think they should have included him, and he didn't have the confidence perhaps to sort of say, look, I'm also part of the band, and here's my lyrics, or here's my... And he had a lot to offer, But
You're not allowed to pick your own record, by the way, but have you got a favourite Christmas record otherwise?
Well, it's either Greg Lake's I Believe in Father Christmas,
Me too.
or Stay Another Day by East 17, or Elvis Presley's Santa Claus is Back in Town. They're my top three.
Blue Christmas I like as well.
That's a good one, but Elvis, that is a
late-
good time, pretty baby.
It's very much
That's the
crooner
Shakin'
type of-
Stevens.
Yeah, exactly.
It's Elvis's blues,
Yeah.
It's not Shakin' Stevens blues.
It's because the backing singers are overpowering on that.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Yeah.
Too much.
Yeah. Did Shakin' Stevens do a
No,
version? Oh,
but
I
he
see.
sounds like
That's
Shakin'
such a-
Stevens. He's like parodying himself almost, isn't he, by then? That's really interesting. Like I saw a quote somewhere where someone said "Stop the Cavalry" is the saddest Christmas song.
Oh, I think Stay Another Day is very sad because the guy had lost his brother, and just imagine him saying, "Oh, stay another day. If only you stayed another day.
Yeah.
To stay alive." That was sad.
Weirdly, I think a lot of Christmas songs are quite sad. I think the ones that really strike home, there's that sort of pathos in them, isn't
And
there?
I've heard it said that actually even some of the poppy ones are quite sad,
yeah.
or there's sort of hidden meanings there.
Last Christmas, I gave him a heart. The very next day, he
That
threw it
song
away.
makes no sense whatsoever at all. No sense.
And it was a blatant attempt to have a Christmas number one as well, wasn't it? It was
So
like, right, we need to
last
have
Christmas, I gave you my heart. The very next day, threw it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give it to someone special. She dumped you a year ago, mate. Get over it.
Except to say that it's the anniversary.
All right, fair enough.
That's the only thing, and it must have meant an awful lot to her,
I guess so, yeah.
to him. It's only a story anyway in a song, firstly, but that can happen to adolescent love.
You're remembering
You know,
Christmas.
if you that emotions are so raw and right and tender, that I can imagine someone remembering a year later on that day, because it can cut you like a knife.
Yeah.
Those sort of those experiences.
No one says it, but it's the same as Neighbours.
I was going somewhere else.
It's the same. Anyway, so
Yeah.
that's Tony Hatch, no?
Yeah, it is.
yeah.
Tony Hatch.
So
He got a lot out of that one, didn't he, Tony Hatch? Is he dead?
he's still alive, but
I thought
very,
he
very
might
old.
be.
How many times has Cavalry been covered?
Thousands, to be honest. Thousands. I mean, it's had an amazing life because at one point there were tons and tons of live versions.
A lot of German Oompa bands cover it every year or something like that.
Oh, that would be obviously the case.
yeah,
But there's just so many versions. It's unbelievable.
yeah.
You'll never get to the end of what the covers are. I discovered this about 4 or 5 years ago for a certain reason. I think there was a reason for it. You know, I had no idea there was that many people covering it.
Seaside Shuffle was big in Germany as well, wasn't it?
It was actually.
The accordion,
It got to number 1 over there.
Yeah.
A cover of it got to number 1.
Right. Okay.
Not Seaside Shuffle, but there was a cover of it.
Yeah.
And so that was amazing.
2 here as well, I think, wasn't it? Number 2 here, I think.
Seaside was number 2
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
yeah. And that was pure luck.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say 10 minutes ago.
Boom.
You got no idea how thin the line is between success and failure. You were talking about the Stones and got picked up by A, B, and C. Otherwise, who knows?
Yeah.
I totally agree. It's just absolute. You've got to be in the right place at the right time. All right, you really have.
Yeah.
You have to contribute though. You've got to turn up with some goods in the end, regardless. But to get there, to be in a position to do that, is pure luck. I found that time and time again. The success I've had with Seaside Shuffle, Kitchenette Parties, and Cavalry are all pure luck. That's another show, okay? The dividing line between success and failure, I've really experienced that.
Party got an afterlife a couple of years ago with the adverts and everything as well. I bet you couldn't believe
Yeah.
that's luck as well.
Yeah,
isn't it?
all
presumably-
added bonus, mate.
Yeah.
and was that just a director who just loved the song and he'd been hanging around there? What happened?
Someone who worked at IKEA loved in the IKEA department for advertising to the world about IKEA and how great IKEA is in customer services or whatever it was. And she wanted Kitchenette Parties to be used for the kitchen department. Because there was never a pop video done of Kitchenette Parties.
Right.
All the stuff you see on YouTube about Kitchenette Parties was from TV appearances. That's why when Cavalry came along, Dave Robinson made it as important that he got a video for it in case we missed the boat.
Right.
For the video, because we missed the boat for Kitchenette Parties
Right.
with the video. And the videos at that time were important tools of promotion.
Yeah. And that's why there's confusion about Kirsty MacColl being on the record, because
Yeah.
she performed it live with you a few times.
Yeah, she
didn't
did indeed, but she wasn't on the actual
Yeah.
record.
Yeah.
But she was a lovely person, and I'm very sad about her ending.
Yeah.
That was a terrible way to go. Yeah, I know. So what are you up to now then? Did I hear the famous couplet new album?
Oh yeah, right, I do have a new album out, incidentally.
Doing these.
You can buy it here at the stall at the gig. I'll tell you what, the record business nowadays though is very difficult, isn't it? But anyway, it's a proper release kind of thing, with a CD and a vinyl, all that kind of stuff. And so, what's the question?
Well, you got a new album out. That's it, right?
Yeah,
plug
that's
down.
it.
Yeah.
They've so I've got one. One of them's coming out. Coming out. What, I mean, you know, what is a release nowadays?
Yeah,
It's a joke.
It arrives.
But anyway, it's coming out. It's been dropped. They use the word drop, don't they?
They do.
On January the 6th, with a definitive date to make it sound really good, you know. And
Next week, you mean? It's Christmas Day today.
You can
but
almost-
yeah.
Next week.
That's right. So don't forget. But
What's it called?
what, the name of the album or the name of the track?
The name of the album.
Are You Free Tuesday?
So Christmas, we've Christmas 2024. It's not been much of a year, actually, is it? So the best thing that happened this year was you put an album out, and we started the Without the Beatles podcast. Otherwise, it's been pretty much the worst year on record.
Just limping over the line to start a new...
Well, for the world.
Not us, the world.
The world.
Yeah, we're doing it right.
We're doing.
Well, it's world domination though next year, isn't it?
Yeah,
world
exactly.
domination, So hopefully we can chart our progress together.
That's right. Compare notes.
Yeah, exactly.
Say hello on the way as we cross paths.
You're all waving.
I'm up, you're down, or you're down, I'm down, up.
So we normally ask people, as a final time after we've had the discussion, can you imagine life without the Beatles? But I'm going to make it different because it's Christmas Day. Can you imagine your life without Stop the Cavalry?
Well, that's again another very interesting question, and it's no doubt been a very important part of my earnings, obviously. So there's that, and people need money to live on. Having done a track that's done so well, people, sort of, well done.
People turn up in your kitchen and demand tea from you.
Yeah, that's right. I get a bit of something out of that, a bit of measure out of that one. So
On the right day, on the right year, it can. So for me, of course, 1980, I'm 13 when it came out, and I remember it very clearly. Loved it then, but of course, it's a family classic. We all listen to it and everything. It can still give me goosebumps. Cavalry.
Well, that's an amazing compliment. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's nothing to do with you. It's just tied in with the thought of my mum and dad. And no. Of course it is. Of course it is. It's a brilliant record.
But I know what it's like to have goosebumps for music. I got amazing goosebumps when I heard The Fat Man by Fats Domino for the first time. I was just, and every time I hear it, it's like I've never heard it before. And then you become so familiar with it as well, paradoxically.
Yeah.
What's your one, Mark? What's your goosebump record?
Well, I was just going to say, it's really interesting. The other day, generally this happened. I was in little, there's little tiny mini Sainsbury's where I go opposite the train station. So I'm running late. I've forgotten to get there. Pop in there, and they started playing the Christmas trucks on. Your record came on, Stop the Cavalry, and this woman just sort of stopped and looked at me and smiled. And it's that's amazing, that isn't it? You can still do that in effect. And she was obviously, it brings back those sort of memories, doesn't it? So it kind of, and it's like we were saying, it's got that happy, sad, something which I think, also we talk about some of the.
I was in a surreal situation where I was in a shop a bit like that, and it came on just as I sort of came back into the shop, as if, do they know that, I'm him, sort of thing. And there's all these surreal, and then I see myself looking at myself, sort of hearing it as by someone else. It's crazy if you hear it in a shop.
At least you're not Noddy. Poor old Noddy. Can you imagine what it must be like for Noddy?
Screaming.
It's Christmas.
He'll have no throat left if he does it again.
No, but I mean, people shout at him every day.
Yeah.
I mean,
because that's become a bit of a vocal icon, isn't it?
Yeah. But you get away with that, so you don't at least have that, do you? I mean, no one comes up to you and sings a line from Stop the Cavalry, do they?
It's quite hard
Well,
to do, isn't it?
sort of a bit, they'll quote that line if they want to quote it.
Oh, by the way, learning, just busking it on piano the other day, that's actually a bloody fast line to play on bass. So it's better as doing as vocals, isn't it? It's
easier.
A piano part, you know what I mean?
And it was never a bass line anyway.
Yeah.
It was just a top line melody, but I did it by voice. It wasn't because I couldn't do it on the bass. I never thought of it that way. It was just part of the poor old guys marching along and together, as they marched along,
Yeah.
Well, it's been amazing having you on. Good luck with the album. I'll look forward to hearing it when I get home. Is it your usual mix of a bit of everything? I like that quirkiness of yours.
I don't know really. It's just I've never known. It's just I just do it, whether it fits or I don't know. It's up to whoever hears it, Wish I was at home for Christmas.
Happy Christmas, everyone.
Happy Christmas.
See you in 2025.
Merry Christmas, Jonah.
How much is that going to cost?